NBA free agency started this past Sunday, and some major moves has taken place. I guess we'll just get started with the big one, and that's I guess the biggest. Well, it was he opted out, which means he ended up being one of the bigger free agent out there, and that was Paul George. He decided to go to the Philadelphia 76ers, 4 year, 212 max. He is 34 years old. I just want to get your impact or your thoughts on Paul George's impact for the Philadelphia 76ers. Jay, I'm gonna start with you first.
Britt, I think, if you're a Sixers fan or even if you're the Sixers organization, if you have an opportunity to get a guy like Paul George, I think you have to do it, right? So I think from that standpoint, it's a good move from the organization standpoint. Anytime you can add a really, really good basketball player to your team, you got to do it. The only reason that I'm saying, like, you got to be a little cautious about this is because we've seen big threes in the past and three stars trying to get together, and it's never really worked. I mean, outside of maybe Steph, KD, and Clay and Golden State, I don't really know of any other big three that has come together and they actually paid it off with a championship. So I think the challenge in Philly is going to be, can they figure out this three with Maxey, Embiid, and now Paul George? Can they figure out a way to work well together and actually run an offense where it just flows and it's not my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn? If they can figure that out, Britt, I think they're going to be really, really dangerous. But I'm just cautiously optimistic because the whole big three thing hasn't really worked out very well with other organizations.
Yeah, I think for me, and I get what you're saying, Jay. I just think for me, it's a seamless fit because this is the one piece that they were missing. They have been looking and searching for wings. They thought maybe Tobias Harris can play that role, and Tobias Harris just looked like he got lost in the sauce, I guess you can say. And I
Yeah.
try to give him somewhat credit because as they were kind of playing, I don't know, tag with having people come in and out of lineup, his role constantly had to change. So he never was able to get that consistent role that you need. But with Paul George, he could play off the ball. He has the ability to play off the ball. He has the ability of the catch and shoot. And then if something happens to Embiid, as long as they stay healthy, health is the biggest factor in my to me in this situation. If they could stay, let's say Embiid can get some rest, or maybe he's out a game or two, then it could be a Maxey Paul George situation, and Paul George can step it up a little bit more if need be. I think he's more of a better shooter than a Tobias Harris. I think he could play defense better than a Tobias Harris, although he is 34 years old.
Yeah.
I just think this is just a seamless transition for Paul George, and I think with a head coach like Nick Nurse, he'll help them figure things out. I feel like Paul George doesn't need to be the main guy in the situation. I mean, he's getting paid like one, which is great. But if you look at a lot of places like the Clippers, he wasn't the main guy there. I don't think he had a problem. He actually wanted to stay with the Clippers. And I think he helps Embiid and Maxey tremendously on the floor. Now, the important piece is what role players are they going to surround these guys with, because they don't have a complete roster yet. They got three guys with $200+ million contracts. So I think that's the biggest thing. But K-Rock, what are your thoughts about Paul George to the 76ers?
Yeah, I was going to mention the last part you just brought up, Britt, is that they don't have that bench yet, but that's going to come. We all know they're going to fill those spots. They have to fill those spots. But yeah, it's a combination of both things that you guys mentioned. Jay mentioned the success or lack thereof of the big threes, and is that going to work? I think it can work if and Britt, to your point, if they all can stay healthy. The first thing when I heard this, I immediately went to Paul George, and I immediately went to Joel Embiid's history and how many games that they played throughout their career. With Paul George averages 62 games a season. He's been in the league for 8 seasons, no longer than that. And he's missed quite a few games. Joel Embiid, during his season, he's missed quite a few games. And we're not talking about rest games. We're talking about games due to injury.
Yeah.
Now, can they withstand that? Will that continue to happen? Because according to the numbers, numbers don't lie, is that they don't stay on the court that often. Whether they're the man or not. Even when Paul George was back in Indiana, he missed games. The Clippers last year, he missed last season, he missed games as well. So you got to ask yourself, how many games are these three going to actually play together? Because based on the history, they're going to be hurt. They're going to be hurt. I don't want to say injured, but they're going to get hurt at some point. They're going to miss some games.
Mm-hmm.
So is it going to be early? Is it going to be in the middle? Is it going to be the latter part of the season? But based off of this, it's going to happen. So that's my main concern. But if everything in a perfect world, these guys stay healthy, it's a great fit. It really is a great fit because you got a guy who can play off the ball as far as Paul George. You got a guy who can bring up the ball in Tyrese Maxey, and he can facilitate and play that pick and roll with Joel and Embiid as well. I think it's an excellent fit on paper. It's a great fit, but can they still stay healthy? That's the key thing there.
Yeah, that's for me. That's the biggest thing. That's really the only thing for me is the health factor. But Jay, just to back to your point, I think because I've heard people compare. They had a big three in Phoenix with Booker, KD, and Bill. I almost forgot his name, and Bradley Bill.
A lot of
To me,
people did.
those are two different fits. To me, Booker, KD, and Bill. Each of those guys need that ball in their hand. They have to have that ball in their hands. This is a different fit. This is exactly what you look for on your team. Maxey, technically he's a shooting guard until they find a point guard. Hopefully, maybe they'll bring back Kyle Lowry. I don't know how much of a starter he can be, being that he's an older guy. But if you can move Maxey back to that 2 to go more back to his natural position, hopefully a bigger point guard. And then you have Embiid at that center position. And then like we just talked about, Paul George is that two-way wing that you look for, and those guys don't really need the ball in their hand as much to do a whole lot of damage, like a KD, Booker, and a Bradley Bill, which is a lot of one-on-one basketball, which to me does not work. These three guys, they kind of play off each other much better.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying with that, Britt, but my only thing, I don't do you think Paul George in his mind is thinking like I'm gonna have a diminished role? Like, I'm not sure that Paul George is at a stage in his career where he's willing to say, "Oh, I'll just get over here and take my opportunities when they come to me, and I'll be like a catch and shoot wing." Like, I don't think that's how Paul George views himself. And we say, yeah, maybe he wanted to go back to the Clippers, but he was also really frustrated and on record saying this team has no identity because the way that they played, it was obviously frustrating to him. So I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm just concerned because there's really no history of it. Like we've never seen three guys come together. Okay, if we want to say LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, we want to check that box, okay. But it took them time before they were even able to figure it out. So it might work. You guys might be 100% right. But who's the big dog? Who's the second option?
Embiid
Who's the third option?
Like you can't,
I in my mind, I'm not sure Paul George is ready to kind of concede and say, I'm a wing player now. I don't need the ball. I'll take my opportunities when they come.
If that's the case, then you don't come here because this is Embiid's team. This is Embiid's team, regardless of the fact. This is Embiid's team. He's number one. Now, if you want to go between who's number two, first of all, Maxey doesn't even have that type of mentality. He has such a team type of mentality. If Paul George want to be number two, then allow him to be number two. But we know this is Embiid's team.
There's no question it's Embiid's
even
team.
Even Paul George understands that. If
No
not, he's
question.
not going to come here.
But I'm not sure Maxey doesn't believe he's a number two because there were even times in the playoffs where Maxey was like wanting to take the last shot, wanting to have the ball late. So to me, it's just going to be interesting to see if they can navigate that.
I think they'll be able to figure out because I don't think there's as much of an ego situation as you might think. Because there's times where Harden was here or when Jimmy Butler was here, when Embiid was trying to come down to that number two. And we've been trying to push Embiid like, no, this is your team. But he'll take that backseat if he needs to be. And we've seen him when he talks to the players like, no, shoot the ball. I want you to do more. I'm pushing you to do more. I'll be fine. So I think they'll be fine. I think
it could work.
It just depends on, at this point, it's up to Nick's nurse for him to figure it out on how it flows. K-Walk, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just think they have to start focusing on that bench now. To be honest with you, those role players, man, because as you know, the season is getting, the season is upon us. It's coming up upon us real quick. So, and there's only going to be a handful of guys, quality guys out there that you really want to, really can rely on. Because we talked about the big three. That's me. Sorry, guys. The big three. And Phoenix. I have my window open because it's a beautiful day. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I usually have it closed. But anyway, yeah, like the big three in Phoenix, they had those guys, but they didn't have the bench. They didn't have the bench players that first year. Then they brought in some guys after that, but for some reason or another, the big three tapered off. So I just think they have to focus on that because, as I mentioned earlier, that they have a history of getting hurt, and if they have to be on the court longer than they should be or longer than they want to be, then it's going to be a long season for the Sixers for sure. So they got to shore up that bench without question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any thoughts real quick on the impact to the Clippers? Does anybody have any thoughts on how Paul George leaving the Clippers could potentially impact, I guess, how they could go to the playoffs? I know they still have Kawhi. They just signed James Harden to a 2-year, $70 million deal.
Yeah, and
And
Derek
that's
Jones
interesting,
Jr.
right, Jay? He just complained all last year how he didn't get that max, and he still didn't get a max.
But he
But
knows
what
it.
are
But
your
he does.
thoughts on? Do you think this is a big loss for the Clippers?
I do
Anybody can
think
take
it's
it.
a big loss, and to steal one of K Walk's lines, the Clippers are going to clip. Like they're going to be the Clippers. I don't think anything's going to change. Some people think they're cursed. I'm not going to go quite
Hmm.
that far, but I mean, might they make the playoffs? Maybe, I don't know, but I don't think they're going to be irrelevant when it really gets down to it. They won't be one of the best 5 or even 6 teams in the
Right.
West. So I think it's a big loss. And honestly, I'm kind of at the point with James Harden. Like, if he's your main ball handler, I don't know. To me, it's not a recipe for success in today's NBA.
Yeah, I'm on my end. I'm a little curious on how Kawhi feels about it. He may not really talk about it too much, because he's a quiet guy. He stays to himself. I think I seen a picture of him in, I don't know if he was in Cancun or somewhere on vacation, just in his
Yeah,
own little
Birthday.
blissful
Yeah.
world.
Mhm.
um, but I am curious on how he feels about it because Paul George was his guy. That was his guy. He kind of took that 3-year deal because he was hoping that Paul George would re-sign there so many years ago. I'm pretty sure he wanted that 4-year max as well. Um, and I'm with you, Jay. I just don't know what a James Harden. He just still holds on to the ball way too long. And I
yeah,
think that's part of the reason why maybe Paul George was getting a little frustrated. Some of those other guys would get frustrated because he's still doing the same thing that he was on every other team that he's been with. But K Walk, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, with the Clippers, you look at this team. They did sign Derek Jones Jr. as well, a
Hmm.
free agent there from Dallas. Don't know how much that's going to help, but he is he's a quality guy. We saw what he did in the NBA Finals with the Mavericks, but Kawhi is exactly who he is. You don't really know because he's so quiet, so about everything that he does. So so yeah, when James Harden comes back, I mean, when James Harden, Jay, I just think
Hmm.
that with James Harden, anybody who picks him up, any team, you gotta know he's going to be your predominant ball handler. That's just who he is. He needs the ball in his hands, and I know he's a human shot clock violation as well because he takes so
exactly.
long.
Right.
He takes so
Hmm.
long and getting into the offense, and by the time he does, it's about 4 or 5 seconds left remaining on the shot clock. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who else they bring in if they make any trades. But losing Paul George is obviously huge. I
Yeah,
mean, anytime you lose a guy like that, it's devastating, and we'll see how they bounce back from that and what additions other than the two that we mentioned, Derek Jones and re-signing James Harden, what the difference is there, and who they're going to bring in as well. They're not going to bring anyone in there that's going to be able to replace him, but someone who can possibly make up for a little bit of the loss, if you will.
Right. Right. Real quick, we got T Perfect says, "Hey Britt, big fan. I appreciate you, T Perfect. Thank you so much. Please, I hope you keep watching this, and if you're willing to just share our channel. But let's go to the next I guess free agent. um And this one is he was part of the Knicks, but he signed a 3-year, $87 million deal to go to the OKC. To go to the OKC. I wanted to say to go to the Thunder, but I ended up saying OKC. And that's Isaiah Hartenstein. I think I said that
Hartenstein.
properly.
Yes,
I think they
Hartenstein.
just say I heart is what I believe they call him, something like that. So Isaiah Hartenstein, big man, leaves the Knicks, who played a tremendous role in the playoffs this past year, is now with OKC. What's your thoughts on this move? K Walk.
I love it for OKC, because Hartenstein was the heart of of the Knicks last season, no pun intended, without question. But them bringing in who they brought in and re-signing OG. I think they felt like they're okay with losing that, but yeah, Hartenstein, man, is going to be a huge addition. I think it's exactly what OKC needs. That guy who does
Mhm.
it all. I mean, he's going to rebound. He's going to give you those hustle points. He's going to give you those stats that those plays that don't show up in the box score. He does every little thing the right way. He comes and plays where he puts his heart hat on. It comes to play each and every day or each and every night. And I love the move. I think it's an excellent fit. I think it's something that OKC needed, a great piece to put them, in contention for a legitimate contention for,
Mhm.
coming out of the West without question, because you know how close they were last season. And I think Hartenstein, you always pose that one way. If they had Hartenstein last season, do that if segment that you have. If they had Hartenstein last season, then I think it would have been a deeper run for OKC. So great pick up there, and like Hartenstein said, yeah, he didn't like those guys anyway. So so it wasn't. So he said it dead to him. Of course, to him, they're dead to him. So
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, K Walk. I think his size and his rebounding is going to be tremendous for OKC. I think that was one of the issues with them was that size and the post, and he's definitely going to provide that mentality that he has. I didn't realize how tough he was, and he's a tough guy. He's a
yeah,
tough guy, and I think that's what hurt the Sixers because when they did not have Embiid, they just couldn't rebound. If Hartenstein was in, you're not going to out rebound him whatsoever. I don't care if all five guys was down there; they just wasn't able to do it. And because of that, I do think it's a huge loss that not a lot of people are talking about from the Knicks. I think he was important to the Knicks. I know they have Mitchell Robinson, but same thing that we just discussed with the Sixers is injury. Mitchell Robinson seems to be injured a lot, so
yeah,
and he was that hustle. I don't want to say dirty because he's not a dirty player,
yeah.
but just did the dirty work.
Gotcha.
That's what I want. He did the dirty work. He got the rebounds, the offensive rebounds, the putback points. He had the size that was needed, and that helped the Knicks get as far as they did until they lost to Indiana because due to injury and exhaustion. But Jay,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Isaiah Hartenstein to OKC, and if you have thoughts on the impact to the Knicks?
Yeah, I think it does hurt the Knicks a little bit, but I also agree with K Walk that the pieces that they added, and then if they
Mm,
keep Randall, I think the Knicks are going to be fine. But from OKC's perspective, I think it's a perfect fit. It's kind of like
mhm,
that missing piece that they need to kind of get over the hump. So I think it puts them in position, to possibly get to a Western Conference final, maybe even an NBA Finals, because we saw the success that they had last year. I think adding this piece just gives them another little boost up in a very, very competitive Western Conference. So I think it's a great move by OKC.
Real quick, and I know this isn't on our topic list, but before we go to the next free agency, because you just brought it up, Jay, they do still have Julius Randle. On how they played last year, because they were able to move the ball so effectively, because they were able to, I don't know, they just played so well together without a Julius Randle. Can Julius Randle come in because he tends to hold on to that ball a
Yeah.
lot? Could he potentially mess up the flow going forward, or do you think we have something good going on? Let's figure out a way to incorporate Julius Randle. What are your thoughts on that, Jay?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last night with Coach Riley and
Hmm.
Britt. I
Yeah.
think 100% he can come back, but there
Hmm.
needs to be a conversation before he does. And that conversation is you are no longer number one. Like this team has
Right.
changed. This is Brunson's team now. We'd love
Hmm.
to have you back, but it's going to be a different role. And if Randall can accept that role and accept, okay, I'll get in where I fit in, I think it'll be
Mhm.
great. But if in his mind he still thinks I'm the guy, then it's not going to work, and they're going to have to think about moving off of him. But if they can talk to him, Britt, and convince him, hey, you're a
Mhm.
big part of the team, you're just not the guy anymore. If they
Right.
could do that, I think he helps.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned that he's going to think that he's still the guy. And we've seen what happens to this Knicks team when he's operating in the post. It's like things just it gets stagnant. Kind of like when James Harden wants to hold on to the ball
Yeah.
until, what, you got 30 shot clock, 30 seconds on the shot clock. No, I'm sorry, 24. What am I
24,
talking
yeah.
about? 24, and he's holding it until 20 seconds, and then they go. Julius Randle could sometimes be a similar situation, not as
Right.
too much to the extreme, but he causes issue in the flow of that offense. But K-Walk, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Jay here. I think if he's willing to, to take that take that role spot, I think he'll be really good coming off the bench. Being, if he comes off the bench and be that six man, I think that he could do that. I mean, I think
Oh,
if he
I
leads
agree.
that,
I just
if he,
wonder if
yeah, I
he
know,
would
He is
agree.
not doing
I
that.
know, I know that. I'm saying that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. If he can agree to
Right.
doing that, that team would be really, really unstoppable. Not unstoppable, but very
Hmm.
well in position to challenge Boston to come out of the East, because we know that they're deep. If he can come off of the bench, if he's willing to
Hmm.
come off of the bench and he's willing to lead that second unit, the sky's pretty much not want to say the limit, but they're in a good spot.
Right.
Meaning the Knicks, to go far into the playoffs and possibly the NBA Finals. But the $100,000 question is he willing to do that? And then
Yeah.
we looking on the outside, I don't think we're so confident in that he's willing to do that, knowing how ball dominant
Mhm.
that he is. I'm going to say no. I'm not going to speak for you guys, but from the facial expressions that I'm getting, I'm pretty sure that you guys are thinking the same thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not
Yeah,
sure
I
he's willing to accept like
willing,
a
right,
diminished role, let
right,
right.
alone
let
come off
alone
the
the bench
bench.
role,
So
right,
Right.
yeah, we'll
exactly,
see.
I'm
exactly.
yeah, I'm looking at it as I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks decide to potentially trade him. I'm saying it here right now, based off the chemistry that they have without him. And then you added Mikal Bridges in there. I don't know if he's not willing to take a diminished role. I don't it I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go ahead and trade him, but we'll see what happens. All right, let's get back to free agency, guys, because there's a couple more that I want to talk about. Clay Thompson, we're going to talk about him a little bit later. That's going to be part of Jay's segment. So don't go nowhere. We are going to get to him. But Chris Paul, he decided to go with the Spurs. The old man, no disrespect, went to the Spurs for 1 year, $11 million. Will he help Wemby and this young Spurs team? Jay, I'm gonna come to you first.
So, but I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. I love it from the standpoint of obviously you're getting an outstanding veteran
Mhm.
point guard who can run the offense, who can get Wemby the ball. Like one of the most frustrating things about watching the Spurs last year was there were a lot of guys that it just seemed like they didn't understand that, hey, we need to get the ball to Wemby. And there would be times he'd be
Right.
open or they could have threw it to him at the rim and they were busy taking shots that they didn't need to take. So I think Chris Paul fixes a lot of that. So from that standpoint, leadership, just getting the ball, understanding how to play basketball, I think he'll
Mhm.
be great from that perspective. The only little thing that concerns me is that you do hear things about Chris Paul about not necessarily maybe being the easiest guy to get along with and not necessarily maybe being the best teammate in the world. And for a young Wemby, only in his second year, what is he, 19, maybe be 20 years old next
Yeah.
year?
Yeah.
Is that a concern at all? I'm not saying it is, but that's just maybe the one little thing in my mind that might be something to think about. But overall, Britt, I think it's a positive move.
Yeah, I think Chris Paul, I know he's getting older, but he's very wise when it comes to the game of basketball. His IQ is exceptional, and I think he will provide a lot of benefit to Wemby in that young team. He'll help direct them. He's basically going to be the second coach on the court for them. So, and like you just alluded to, he's going to understand Wemby's weaknesses versus his strengths, and he's going to put him in a position to ensure the second person outside of Coach Pop, of course, to ensure that he gets to ball where he's most strongest at, where he can do the most damage. Chris Paul understands that. Chris Paul also understands the pace of the game. Let's slow it down here. Let's speed it up here. Now, he may not be able to speed it up as much as he wants to,
No.
but you guys get where I'm going with this. Even if he has to pass it to one of the young guys, like say, hey, take it, just go with it. He'll do that. And I think that's going to help Wemby and those other players, those other young players on the Spurs, help them along in their development. And I think they're going to make a much bigger leap. I'm not saying leap as far as contending, no, but maybe make it to the playoffs this year or even in the tournament this year. Okay, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I love this move for the Spurs, man, and for Chris Paul. I think it's a great fit for the Spurs and for Wembanyama, more importantly, because I think you need a guy like like Chris Paul. I can't call him the point god anymore, more like a point disciple, if you will. But he's still, but he can still get it done. He's still there, still got the mindset, and he's understanding how to get things done, how to run an offense, and get these guys. I mean, he knows how to lead. I mean, look, he was the vice president of the NBA Players Association, so he understands how to lead, and he understands what these guys have to do in order to succeed. And then you mentioned Britt Pop. I mean, you got Pop there, so I don't see him being that guy that Jay mentioned or he's heard of. Not being a great teammate. I can see that the older you get, the more you understand that you got to change your ways, and it's no longer about the money, it's about the rings and things of that nature. So I'm not saying they're going to win a ring. I mean, get a ring, but I think they'll be in a lot better position to contend for either a playoff spot or play-in spot, with this team. And I think that a guy like Chris Paul is is exactly what Wembanyama needs. And not only they drafted the young kid out of UConn as well, so he can mentor him, if you will, get him ready, because he is the future of the Spurs organization. So I think it's a good fit all around for Chris Paul and for the Spurs. I think this is a sneaky, really. I think it was probably the best free agency move. Not saying not from a talent standpoint, but just for a fit-in piece. I know we talked about Hartenstein, but just a piece that a team needed. I think this is one of the sneakiest ones there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if anybody want to read the comment. I clear my throat.
Yeah, CP3 is going to be good for Stephen Castle's development. Yeah, and that's what you were alluding to, K-Walk. Yeah. And I actually thought that the pick in Castle, I thought that was a great pick, man. Like, I know he was a freshman at Connecticut, but you can see the upside all over this kid. I think he's going to end up being one of the better players in this draft. And so I think the Spurs getting him was a great pick. And then adding CP3 to mentor him, to teach him the guard position, man, I think it speaks volumes. So definitely.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like I'm starting to love the playing field in the NBA. It's starting to feel like that when I was growing up. I can't say old school because I wasn't around, but when I was growing up, the 90s into the 2000s, like every team had that superstar. Every team had a good quality role players, and it was just a lot of competition. So I feel like we're starting to get back there. But I got